Minnesota in probably 20 years.
Bring gas. Welcome to Flagrant Howls, a Minnesota Timberwolves lifestyle podcast.
Do the math, I think. So they were down by 15 points in the first quarter. They're sleepwalking on the second leg of a back-to-back. And they win by 25. Was the high water mark 27? It was more than a 40-point turnaround from where they were in the first quarter last night in Utah. Just crazy. We got a Feedback Friday for you here. Flagrant Howls, Phil Mackey, sports dad Judd Zulgad, producer Declan. And we'll get to, at least for sure, there's a bunch to discuss even just aside from feedback. But I think there's a good one here that plays into a point Judd made on our group text thread that we'll start with. But let's first take the audience to one of our favorite places, Butcher and the Boar, if we could, Judd.
Absolutely. So you're going to a Wolves game and you're debating where should I go eat before the game. And Sportsnet is going to tell you right now, the North Loop is the perfect place to go. And the perfect place to go, of course, is to see our friends at the Butcher and the Boar. Great for family and business gatherings. Southern-style hospitality food that we can all attest is absolutely outstanding. Happy hour as well, 4 to 6 every day. So that plays in perfectly if you're going to a 7 o'clock Wolves game, for instance. And also get the Judd special, a beer, a brat, and a shot for $15. That's right, the Sports Dad special is pretty good, huh? Huge homemade beer brat with sauerkraut and mustard, any draft beer, any rail shot, and that beer brat, sauerkraut and mustard, sounds like my taste. Spicy as can be. You're going to love it. Check out Butcher and the Boar in the North Loop in Minneapolis, right near Target Center.
Also a shout out to our friend Wolves Realtor, Dex, helping to power Flagrant Howls here.
Absolutely. If you're looking to sell your home, if you're looking to buy your first home, it's a complicated and sometimes intimidating process. My friend Heather, I saw her at the Wolves game on Monday with her husband Darren. We talked some Wolves. And also, if you're looking to sell your house, go hit up Heather. WolvesRealtor.com for all those needs of selling that house or buying your first-time house. You can request a free consultation. And if you go to the site, you scroll down, you'll see our Flagrant Howls logo, but you'll also see you can register to win 2 free lower-level tickets to the February 6th game against the Rockets. So go enter for your chance for a great game. Wolves against Rockets on February 6th. Also, everyone that registers gets a free schedule magnet as well, so you get a little something from registering. Plus, if you're looking to sell that home, go hit up Heather. WolvesRealtor.com.
So this first one, by the way, you can hit us up. We're perusing YouTube comments and the feedback tab in the Score North app. You can always hit us up here. Even if you hate watch or hate listen to the show, we will take your criticism here on Feedback Friday. Mike K says, that was far and away, no close second, the best second night of a back-to-back Anthony Edwards has had in his career against the Jazz last night. Flirting with a triple-double, 3 of the top 8 players in the rotation out with injury. Weirdly, maybe the workaround to get better performances out of Ant on these back-to-backs is to do what Finch refuses to do and rest veterans on back-to-backs. Well, Conley got let's call that a veteran rest night last night. And let Ant play with the kids. It makes Ant realize they need him to win. The young guys making plays hypes him up. He definitely had an extra little juice in his step, man, hitting those dagger threes at the end. And it felt like he was a lot. One of his bugaboos, teams are running double teams at him quickly. I mean, it's the ultimate compliment where you touch the ball in the half court, they run 2 guys at you to try and get the ball out of your hand. And sometimes he is not fast enough to make a decision, but last night it was like, boom, find the open man, middle of the court, Rudy Gobert, kick it out here, wide open 3, bang, bang, bang. Decision-making, playmaking, knocking down threes. I mean, there was an energy last night. Your Garza, Jalen Clark, Rob Dillingham, undeniable energy in Utah.
They played the kids, which was great. I think this goes back to, and look, this is not a hammer that you can drop multiple times per season. I think this goes back to Finch's explosion on Monday, followed up by his Wednesday disdain, followed up by his Wednesday being tossed. The time had come, and we'll see if this works long-term now, but the time had come for somebody, probably the head coach, to basically say, enough is enough. This is garbage. Like, we are far too good to play like we do, which is, hey, we beat the Suns. Now let's take a game or two off, and we're playing the Jazz. Who cares, right? Now, they did go down early, but there's two things that I like. First of all, Finch needed to do this. This was a perfect time. First of all, they beat the Hawks, so he wasn't like berating a team that had just lost. But second of all, they deserved it. And then the Suns game, I loved the intensity. And then probably just as important was what the person just said there. He played the kids. The kids bring energy. Dillingham brings energy. Garza's not a kid at this point, but he still brings something. Jalen Clark is for real, man. Like I don't think he's going to be a great scorer, but the defense, that defensive intensity alone brings something to the floor that a lot of teams don't have and a lot of players lack. Like that's his calling card. And it is what he's doing is considered, I think, by a lot of guys to be a crappy job. And second of all, it's a hard job. So I think the combination of both of those things played a huge role in the fact that, yes, the Jazz stink. I'm not sure how they're quite so bad because they do have a lot of recognizable names, but they're terrible. But in the Wolves, case,
they do have a lot of recognizable.
Right? But I'm watching.
It is kind of weird. Yeah,
I'm watching them play, and I'm like marking in over to Clark.
John Collins.
Yeah,
Walker
John
Kessler. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I'm like, how's this team so bad? But anyway, I think it is this is probably sad to say, but I think it's a really positive sign that they did eventually end up just walloping a team that this year they have allowed to stick around or beat them far too many times.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wonder if Jalen Clark, who obviously has like a lot of great defensive prowess, we just talked about the energy is contagious. His offense, we don't really know yet. And in college, I just looked this up too, because I was wondering, all right, well, the evolution, right, of the 3-and-D guys, which has now like become just such a huge, great role for the Wolves. Like Jalen Clark shot 32% from three in his career. He really didn't take a ton of 3-pointers. If he can find, even though, a role on coming off the bench, being a defensive stopper, creating energy there, you can, I would assume, be able to fine-tooth and become an offensive player over the offseason and find a role where you do fit. But I'm glad that they're actually like unleashing this bench. I know their hand was forced a little bit with the injuries or ineffectiveness or rest, etc. There was sickness going around. But I enjoyed finally seeing guys like Dillingham and Jalen Clark. And, Garza's upgraded from Mark Madsen towel waiver to actually now hitting shots and putting meaningful minutes in.
Yeah,
it's good to see them actually do it. He can play. He can 100% play.
Garza, I think if you were to put Garza, you got to be a little careful because, like, if you put him up against, the top half of the league starting lineups, I think he's kind of a tweener a little bit size-wise and defensively might be a train wreck. But, yeah, like, he has a bag of offense. He can hit threes and he can... He does a great job with some of those little two-man game concepts where he'll set a screen, then he'll roll toward the basket, you'll dump it in. Like he didn't miss he missed a couple shots in garbage time, but he was like 6 for 6 before garbage time last night. So obviously the big talker, and my Twitter timeline is just filled with debate and discussion about why did the Wolves and Chris Finch wait so long? It's like, it does kind of remind you of, for Vikings fans, Justin Jefferson's rookie year, and they're struggling to move the ball through the air the first couple games. But they just drafted Justin Jefferson the first round. Like, why has he not really played in the first 2 games? And finally, Mike Zimmer unleashes Justin Jefferson in the 3rd game, and it's like, oh, there's like a 70-yard touchdown, and he's grittying in the end zone, and it was just a juice that, why didn't you trust that in week 1 or week 2? And the Wolves played basically an 8-man rotation for 40 games. And only when DiVincenzo went down and then like Naz Reid out first leg of a back-to-back, and then like you've got these injuries now and Julius Randle, have they been kind of forced? Jalen Clark was sort of shocked that he was playing against the Suns. Jalen Clark told the media, yeah, that, to be honest with you guys, before the Suns game, I was watching my cousin try to run like a 7-minute mile or something. He was like watching something before the game. He said, I didn't go through my whole pregame workout routine because I never play.
I'd bench him again. That's it.
Unprepared.
Sorry, kid, you're done. You're done.
Sorry that you are plus 43 in 27 minutes in these last 2 games. But I want to read you a quick back and forth, one of the many threads going through my timeline, and get your thoughts on this. So I said, the Timberwolves played an 8-man rotation for like 40 games. Laugh out loud.
And you've been asking,
what are we doing here?
For a semblance of this for quite some time.
Yeah, just, and maybe, of course, like, is there room for a 19-year-old Rob Dillingham to not be fully ready, undersized in the first 10 games? Yeah, I'm not saying that you would have gotten 19-8 like he put up last night in the first 10 games of the year. So I get that. And then, so person A says, I think the only one surprised that the rookies can produce is Finchy, right? Everyone's laughing. Finchy, what are you doing? And Michael Grady Hay, not the real Michael Grady, but Michael Grady Hay, a parody account maybe, says, Finch knows how to get a lot out of players. Fans always think they're smarter than coaches. It's so funny. Finch has coached in several countries, different levels for decades. But hey, fans say play the young guys, and now you're all geniuses. So to spin that into a question here, Feedback Friday, how much criticism do Finch and company deserve for not leaning more into young guys earlier? Or is it a matter of, hey, they had a process that they knew would work later in the season. All of us were being impatient, but now we're seeing the fruits of the behind-the-scenes labor.
Okay, so all due respect, Michael Grady Hay.
Not the real Michael Grady.
Not the real Michael Grady. Not the cash, because you're great. You're fantastic. You're one of the best in town. But this parody account, my starting point is this. First of all, yes, we all know, for the most part, I would hope, that these coaches know more, okay? Like, nobody's saying they're smarter basketball minds. Nobody's saying this or that. But the reality is twofold, in my opinion. One is, with how this team was playing, there was room for... And I don't think anyone on this show until maybe recently had said, you got to play Jalen Clark, okay? But Dillingham's the 8th overall pick. And Dillingham not playing unless he, and getting pulled out if he screwed up, to me, was like, you don't draft a guy top 10 to do that unless you think he's just not that good, which would be a real indictment on Tim Conley. So I think that if this team had gotten off to a phenomenal start, like if that 8-man rotation had just been phenomenal, and this team was kicking ass in the Western Conference, you'd have a pretty compelling case to say, yeah, you know what? It's going to be hard to play the kids. But they weren't. And furthermore, the problem is they were underachieving. Like, it wasn't like, well, they're trying real hard, but no, they'd win 3, they'd lose 4, they'd win 3, they'd lose 3. So I think there is a very good discussion to be had here about what took so long, not with everyone who's playing now, but certainly with a few guys. And nobody was trying to say that they should necessarily bench guys, but it took, how long did it take to say, Mike Conley's not the same player. You should probably pull back there a little bit. Mm-hmm. So I don't subscribe to this, well, you can't question the coach because he knows a ton. I think that we are seeing the results of what happens when you let kids play. And with this Wolves team, which was really, for a large portion of the first part of the season, a lifeless bunch of dead-ass players, what these kids bring, they might screw up, but they bring enthusiasm and they bring a tempo. And quite frankly, this is the most important thing. If they're going to unlock Ant to a certain degree, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, it was palpable last night. He was on the bench, on the court, just celebrating the young guy's success. And Julius Randle went out 10 minutes into the game, tweaked his groin, and there's a whole conversation about what that means for the next week, and we can get into it. But at the time of his departure, the Wolves were down by 14 points in the first quarter to one of the 5 worst teams in the NBA record-wise. From that point forward, so Kyle and I on yesterday's episode, we broached the subject of if you were to, because trading Julius Randle, you'd essentially be trading him for second apron cap relief, luxury tax relief. You might take on an expiring contract, but no matter what, trading Julius Randle isn't resulting in another $30 million player coming in. You'd be trading him and then filling his void with in-house options. So it'd be like more Naz Reid, or more, you'd extend the rotation out to include maybe Luka Garza or just smaller guys like Jalen Clark. And I know that it was Utah. you have to take, it's a small sample size, huge grain of salt. But he goes out, they're down by 14, and they outscored the Jazz by 39 points the rest of the way. So, like, again, it's one game, it's the Jazz, it's a game that you're supposed to win. You shouldn't have been down by 14 points, 15 points to begin with. But now what we're going to get to see, and we don't have an official update on Randle, but he's probably not playing in these. I would guess the way he limped off, and it's a groin injury. Like, I'm not saying he's out for the season by any means, but he's probably out for at least a week or two. But now what you're going to see is Naz Reid's going to start for the first time all season. Mm-hmm. You're going to see Naz in the starting lineup. What I would do is I would actually lean into mixing in Rob Dillingham in the starting lineup too, and just because these are guys that are going to be, in theory, with you going forward. Let's see what this looks like. But you're going to get to see some of it in the next week. I guess the next question, though, is how does the Julius Randle groin tweak last night impact what may or may not happen in the next 7 days before the NBA trade deadline?
Well, yeah,
that was my first thought when he starts limping off the court.
I thought, oh my God, he is not tradable now next Thursday, which is a problem. But I want to go back to the point about playing the kids, though, because my thing is this, and Phil, you often talk about the fact that, just because the Wolves went to the Western Conference Finals last season does not mean that the path is, okay, back to the Western Conference Finals, that the growth, can ebb and flow a bit. But where I have a problem with that at times is it's the eye test. So if you're going to, try to run this thing back with your vets and Julius, and you don't really show growth, and you get bounced in the first round, for instance, I would call that a failure. But if you're going to go with the young players who are part of your future, like they are your future. So if it's like going to be Dilly Bar and Ant and Nas, and let's say Jalen Clark, let's say lockdown guy, okay, like he gets his, and you get bounced. Okay, that's tough, but you know what you did? Because you're going to bring those guys back, and hopefully they showed you something. Like, that's the growth. That's where I can say, okay, it stinks to get bounced before the place in the playoffs that you did last year in the Western Conference Finals. But that being said, you showed growth. What I saw previous to this with the 8-man rotation was no real growth. It was just sort of a stubbornness, banging your head against the wall with, quite frankly, a bunch of guys who looked like they were having zero fun playing basketball. So if Julius can't be traded for the future of the franchise, it sort of sucks. Like, because now he can opt in. You got problems potentially, but the short term of who's going to play, that's exciting. And Nas starting is exciting, and everyone getting more playing time is exciting.
There is just to be fair on the Julius conversation too. Like, there is a world in which you ride him through the trade deadline to the end of the year. I mean, if he opts out, then okay, problem solved. But
correct,
he could opt in, and that opt-in deadline is before free agency starts, and then you'd have a quick turnaround. You could then trade him with the 1 year left on his contract. So you could, but that's just a lot to facilitate in a short amount of time, while you're also trying to figure out you're having a Naz Reid parallel conversation.
Yes.
About how much money he's going to make. He can be an unrestricted free agent, a Nikhil conversation. So I think, again, maybe you can spin that many plates if you're Tim Connolly and land everything and everything's fine. But it just feels like something you want to solve in the next week, as opposed to kind of dragging it out and maybe letting him dictate what happens in June, July. I have a Dillingham question for you guys too here, but let's shout out Kieran's before we go any further. Right across the street from Target Center. Great place if you're looking to pregame, Dex.
Yeah, if you're looking to upgrade that rotation, which you have finally done, Chris Finch, you can also talk about it at Kieran's. You can talk about the Dillingham minutes, the Jalen Clark minutes over a couple taps at Kieran's, which has award-winning pours, some great game day specials as well. So whether it's pregame, whether it's postgame, whether you're just looking for a nice happy hour as well, if the Wolves are playing or not, go stop into Kieran's, just steps away from Target Center and then Target Field as well. Go check out Kieran's in downtown Minneapolis.
So back to the Cat trade for a second, because I want to bring it full circle to my Dillingham question. I contest and have said since the trade, if Tim Connolly felt like Ant plus Cat and role players equaled championship, there is zero chance you make that trade. He made the trade in large part because he didn't feel like those guys making the amount of money that they, in particular Cat, who on a Supermax contract makes, that wasn't a good enough tandem. They didn't align age-wise enough. And quite frankly, Cat wasn't good enough as a playoff performer in his career. That's the harsh truth. Like, that's what Tim Connolly believed. Period. Okay, so they trade him. They bring in Julius Randle, he's also not the second best player on a championship team or like a secondary scorer. He's just kind of a filler piece short term. DiVincenzo, I think there's a lot of upside there still. I think he could turn into, like, maybe if he's a starting player or gets 30 minutes a night, like he could be a secondary scorer. I don't know that he's the secondary scorer on a championship team. It's way too early to ask this, but in the early viewings of Rob Dillingham's game, per 36 minutes in the last 8 games. So the last 8 games it's like, all right, dude, you're going to get significant rotation minutes this month. Here we go. You're going to go from not playing for like 3 weeks to being in the rotation. Per 36 minutes since he's been thrust into this rotation, 22 points, 7 assists, 3.5 rebounds. The shooting percentages are wild, and they will regress back to earth. But he's shooting 57% from the field and 57% from 3. Again, he's not going to be like a 57% career 3-point shooter, 40% maybe. But he can shoot threes. He can create his own offense. He can create for other people. He's got a mid-range floater game. For as undersized as he is, he can convert at the rim, like lightning fast, getting rid of the ball and converting at the rim. Do you think he could wind up being the secondary scorer here? Give it 3, give it 5 years of this whole thing growing together. Did they find the Robin to Anthony Edwards Batman from what you guys have seen in these 8 games?
Oh boy, that's a loaded.
I know it's super
right
early to ask that, but he's a top 10 pick. Like,
well, they
brought him in for a reason.
That's true. I don't know. It's so hard to say right now, yes or no, black and white, because it's just such a difficult assessment to make. But I will say this: I think Tim Connolly knows talent, and I think if you're going to do what he did, which is trade up to the 8th overall pick to take him, and then what we have seen in a very small sample size, which hopefully now will grow, I do think he can be a fundamental foundational piece of a very successful team. I like the fact that they basically have drafted and he can learn from Mike Conley. So they've gotten Conley's replacement, and he can learn now too. So yes, I think he has the potential to be a player who makes a significant impact with Ant, which is why, again, if you play him more now and we get to see that, and it doesn't go as well as you potentially hoped, I still don't think that that's a negative, because I think it will pay off in future seasons.
No, I mean, he is up and down the roster. If you take away, like, there's been 18 guys who've played at least a minute for the Wolves. Let's take off anyone who hasn't played at least 100 minutes. Rob Dillingham, we've talked about his scoring. Rob Dillingham leads the team in assists per 36 minutes too. Like he gets, and you look at some of the peripherals with him and Ant on the court together, and it takes a load off Ant from having to be the primary initiator and then get doubled. Like, Ant can kind of go off and he can take a pass from Dillingham. It's super, super early, but this dude is instant offense on a rookie scale contract now for the next few years. Just super dangerous. And the fact that you're, as Declan said in our text thread, with some of these, it's Jalen Clark. Oh, you just have a lockdown perimeter defender here, and Rob Dillingham. It's like a trade. It's like you just added these 2 dudes to your lineup here for the stretch run, and you go from playing 8 guys a night to now you have a bag of like 10 or 11 players, if everyone's healthy, that you can lean on too. Also, now Nikhil's one of the most important players on the team. But if things go sideways where like some other team makes a crazy offer to Nickeil Alexander-Walker and man, dude, $20 million a year, like some team says he can shoot threes, he's energy guy, defense.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it a little easier to swallow potentially losing a Nickeil Alexander-Walker in free agency that you have a Jalen Clark. Terrence Shannon Jr. I still think is going to be a wing player who can instant offense and maybe play some defense. So I don't want them to lose Nickeil Alexander-Walker, but it feels like, okay, it wouldn't be the end of the world because you actually have a stash of guys that could jump in.
Do you think as guys come back now, eventually, that Finch will continue to play guys too?
It's a great question. I don't know.
I mean,
if DiVincenzo comes back, does that put an end to Jalen Clark's minutes?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah,
it could.
Exactly.
It shouldn't. Dude, we've talked about Memphis plays 10 guys every night.
I know.
Maybe 9 sometimes. And they'll cut it down to maybe 8 for the playoffs.
But I mean, it took guys being hurt, which they really, what's scary is they played some really bad basketball healthy. So it wasn't like, oh my God, guys are out left and right. It took guys being hurt and for Finch to finally basically melt down to start to see these guys. So my question is, if they even out, does Finch continue to expand the rotation and use guys as the DiVincenzos come back? Or does he sort of go back to being stubborn and saying, well, these are my vets? I mean, I would hope it's not that, but I'm not thoroughly convinced.
Yeah, well, hopefully he sees that. And I'm not talking Jalen Clark for 32 minutes. Like, no. Jalen Clark for 9 minutes can be really impactful if he's going to keep giving you this level of energy and defense. And he might even unlock certain parts of the veterans' games. Or maybe this is your chance, as we've talked about. Do some of these guys, Rudy Gobert, 32 years old at this point. He's played in every game. Major credit. In fact, I think the Wolves have 5 guys who've played in every single game. Nikhil's played in every game. Jaden, Julius, Gobert, and Anthony Edwards have all played 48 games. But I just don't know that Rudy needs to be playing 33 minutes a night at his age and the decline. I don't know that even if Randle sticks around, does he need to be playing 33 minutes a night? So can you just can you find 5 extra minutes? And hell, I know like Luka Garza has become kind of almost like a mascot for the team. That dude can score. You're telling me for 6, not every game is going to be a Luka Garza game, but for 6 or 7 minutes here and there, not in garbage time, you're a little stagnant. You need a bolt of lightning from this Tasmanian devil. Yeah. Teams are like leaving him open from 3 because they don't know like that guy's going to hit a 3. Okay,
that guy can
cash.
I've only got one complaint about that game last night. How can you not get Joe Ingles a shot?
Oh, man.
How do you not get Joe
Well, and
Ingles?
if you're the Jazz, why are the Jazz had their starters on the court basically to finish that game as a punishment. If you're Lowry Markkanen, these guys, why are you blanketing him? Give the fan. Certainly, your starters aren't giving the fans what they want with their own play, so you might as well back off 2 feet and let Joe Ingles take a shot.
And everybody loves Joe.
That's the craziest ovation I've seen. Have you ever even in Target Center when Luka Garza checks in, like people aren't that crazy. And somebody might have not told Leonard Miller, by the way. Leonard, you're trying to prove yourself. You're going to the Rising Stars game.
Out of control on that one drive.
Like, dude, Leonard,
I got the ball and just
you're trying to play your way into an actual rotation spot here, but can you just kick one out to Joe Ingles in the corner?
And poor Joe's just standing there in that right corner the entire time.
And he had one where it was he probably could have let one fly, but he made the right pass.
Yeah.
One slot over, and the crowd booed him.
Yeah, it was great. But come on, let's get him a shot in front. Because he's an important player there. Like to us, it's
historically
does not play, but the all-time 3-point percentage guy in Jazz history. Is that right?
I don't know for sure, but he was a sniper 3-point shooter for 9 years.
All time.
Timberwolves, by the way, are now that they're 27-21, so high water mark 6 games over 500. They are a half game back of the Clippers for the 6th. They are a game back of the Lakers for the 5, and they are a game and a half back of the Nuggets for the 4 seed right now, with Washington coming up on their schedule. So through all of this for 2 or 3 months, they could actually wind up sitting in the 4 seed going into the All-Star break if they win a couple more games. Kind of crazy.
I think they've got a 5-game homestand coming up starting Saturday night against Washington.
Yeah.
And aside from Houston, it's games that they
Chicago.
should win or can win for sure.
Yeah, it's Washington. Sacramento's been feisty.
Yep.
Chicago, Houston, obviously one of the best teams in the league. Portland, Portland's they clearly have something on the Timberwolves going back to those 2 games in Portland. But yeah, like 3 of those games, you're going to be heavy favorites. Mm-hmm. And then the other 2 are formidable Western Conference teams. But man, you go 4-1 on that home stretch, you might be sitting there 5 seed, 4 seed. We'll see. So, all right, boys, little feedback Friday here. Timberwolves. Jalen Clark has arrived. Rob Dillingham turning into a Daggermeister. We'll be back with our State of the Wolves episode on Monday here. This is your favorite Timberwolves lifestyle podcast. See you guys.